Social media loves to dictate who can do what, who owns specific techniques, and where the boundaries between traditions begin and end. But the history is rarely that simple. A lot of people don't acknowledge that North America is home to multiple condition-based magical systems. While condition-based spiritual work is strongly associated with the African diasporic traditions, those traditions played a major role in shaping North American folk magic as we know it. Through centuries of cultural exchange, the framework spread across multiple regions and became embedded within numerous folk traditions throughout the Americas. That's one of the reasons why we see recognizable categories of magic appear across multiple traditions, even when the cosmology, ingredients, and techniques are completely different. At its core, condition-based magic focuses on identifying a problem or a condition affecting a person's life and performing spiritual work to change that condition or problem. Bad luck? Cleanse it. Obstacles, open the roads. Love problems, sweeten the situation. You need spiritual defense, you do protection, etc., etc. When you start looking at folk magic historically, you find these kinds of goals everywhere. You see them in brujeria, you see them in hoodoo, you see them throughout the Caribbean, you see them in Southern folk magic, you see them in Appalachian and Ozark traditions, and you see them in Catholic folk practices. Condition-based magic is a system and not a cosmology, and that is something that is confusing for a lot of people. Cosmology refers to the spiritual framework, the belief system that a practitioner is working within. For example, in folk Catholic traditions, practitioners may petition specific saints associated with a particular situation, need, or life circumstance. In folk Christian systems, practitioners are working with God or Jesus, oftentimes with scriptures asking for divine intervention. In Appalachian and Ozark folk traditions, practitioners often draw from various forms of Christianity, family traditions, regional folklore, and ancestral work, depending on the community and the lineage. In hoodoo, practitioners may work with God, scripture, ancestors, spirits, and traditions that developed from the experiences of African Americans in the South, shaped by both African spiritual influences and Christianity. In hoodoo, there's a huge emphasis on ancestral veneration, and it's specifically venerating ancestors who at one point were enslaved in the American South. Other practitioners may work with deities, nature spirits, land spirits, elemental spirits, ancestors, or a combination of multiple spiritual frameworks depending on what region they are from and what their family traditions were. The easiest way to understand condition-based magic is to think of it as a magical order of operations. First, you identify the problem, then you choose the type of work needed to solve that problem. But it's important to remember that different traditions solve the same problem in completely different ways, because they developed within different cultures and had access to different tools, plants, spirits, and religious framework. For example, in brujeria, a practitioner may use abracamino in their road opener, but in Southern folk magic, they may use lemongrass. The ingredients are different, the cosmology is different, and the technique is different, but the condition or the problem being addressed remains recognizable, opening roads and removing obstacles. The same pattern can be found within cleansing work, protection, prosperity work, justice work, love work, and other forms of condition-based magic throughout North America. And the reason for that is because North American folk magic did not develop in isolated little categories like social media wants you to believe. These traditions evolved through centuries of slavery, trade routes, migration, mixed ancestry, religious suppression. People adapted spiritual systems to the environments that they lived in and the resources that they had available. As a matter of fact, cultural exchange has been one of the defining forces shaping folk magic throughout North America, because that's how folk magic evolved. So when people try to isolate a spell category like uncrossing or road opening and treat it as though it exists entirely separate from the broader history of condition-based magic in North America, I think they're missing a much bigger picture. North America is home to multiple condition-based magical systems that developed through survival-based needs. A lot of people don't understand that folk magic doesn't develop in isolation. Techniques spread, ideas spread, plants spread, terminology spreads, because there is no Hogwarts. A lot of these things are passed down orally. And over time, communities adapt those practices to fit their own regional environments, cultural contexts, and spiritual framework. Because folk magic is the magic of the people, and it has always been practical, adaptive, and deeply regional. The further back you look, the harder it becomes to draw clean lines between communities that were constantly influencing one another. History is complicated, and it requires a great deal of nuance nuance when discussing topics like folk magic, cultural exchange, and the evolution of magical traditions. The problem is that nuance doesn't always fit into a 30-second social media video. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something, and I'll catch you guys next time.